Hello, everyone. Hello. Thanks for sticking with us. We know you've been through quite a few of these press conferences already. My name's Stephanie Keene. I'm the PR lead for HPS. I know many of you already. And, we're here because Sam is going to tell us what HPS or Honeywell Industrial Cybersecurity has been up to. And just want to make sure all of you should get an announcement from us shortly. If you don't get it, come to me and let me know, and I'll make sure you get it. And then, without further ado, Sam Wilson.
Great. Thanks, Stephanie. Okay, so as Stephanie mentioned, Sam Wilson, I'm with the Honeywell Industrial Cybersecurity team, one of the global product marketing managers. And I'd like to start today just by asking you a simple question. If you were to study these two USB charging cables on screen, which one is safe? I see some smiles already. You guys are smarter than my last crowd. The answer is, of course, it depends on the device behavior or actions, what it does once it's inserted. And this would not be a good cybersecurity presentation without at least some hat tip to Star Trek or Star Wars. And one of the concepts we'd like to introduce today is this notion of Doppelganger USB devices. So the reference episode from 1967, which predates my time, but might catch a couple of you. What happened in the episode, of course, was there was a transporter malfunction. Some of the crew from the Starship Enterprise, when they got back to the Enterprise, had been swapped with their evil twins or their doppelgangers. So they looked and sounded like the originals, but they were acting very different. And what we'd like to convey to you today is some findings that we've had, some trends that we're seeing in the threat landscape, where we believe the attacks we're going to start seeing from USB devices is going to begin shifting away from malware to how those USB devices themselves behave. So you've probably already heard of some of these before. They have cute names like Bad USB, Rubber Ducky, Bash Bunny. But the thing is, we don't know if we can trust them just by looking at them, right? They're never accurately labeled. So this one has a very convenient label on it, Bad USB. But I guarantee if you plug it in, it won't behave good. We have things called rubber duckies that when you plug them in, they act like a keyboard. These are easy to obtain, by the way, and they don't take it very sophisticated programming to turn them into something that could cause fairly significant damage. And in fact, they look very innocent. So here's an example of one called the Bash Bunny. And I have one here we could pass around later, but very innocent looking device. But on this device is a microcomputer that's embedded. So any command that you could run over Linux can be executed from one of these devices. And so the danger that we're seeing, of course, is this, that although our users are operating in trusted modes, we have systems that are used to giving authorized access to devices. And it's no longer safe to assume that because something looks like a USB storage device, that it can be trusted as such. There was a recent example some of you may have heard of called USB Harpoon. And so the opening slide I started with that showed that innocent-looking USB charging cable is a good example of what's possible nowadays. And so with USB Harpoon, the researchers have actually customized the piece at the very end, and they've added a custom firmware chip onto it that can launch attacks. And there's a demo video that we could show at the end if there's time. But with nothing more than a cable, I could plug it into a computer, and that cable could act like someone trying to attack the system and gain full access and compromise that system. So what can we conclude from what we're seeing? And we have research that we'll talk about here in a minute that backs some of this up too. So this dirty little secret in the industry, and one that we think customers need to pay attention to, is that the types of attacks and the threats we're seeing go beyond simply malware or files. And we need to start protecting against the actual devices themselves that can behave in ways that aren't expected. There was a really great report published by the Ben Gurion University of the Negev in Israel. They did their research the end of 2017 and published in early 2018. And what they did was they categorized 29 different types of USB attacks. 3/4 of those can launch attacks without any type of malware or file themselves. So the actual device is what's launching the attack. We've rearranged their findings visually just to show you on a time scale the increasing frequency. They're color-coded by categories as well to make it simpler, and there's a copy of this that you'll have access to as well if you'd like to look at the details. But the point is that there's a growing trend in the types of attacks that we're seeing, and we would like customers to be aware of this and to be choosing solutions to protect themselves based on this, of course. I wouldn't expect any of you to read this, so please don't try. I don't even know if I could read it from here. But this data has been laid out differently to sort of illustrate clusters of information around possible threat areas. On the left side are the 29 different USB device attack categories. And on the right are the different personas that those devices could take on. So a USB storage device can act like a keyboard, could act like a speaker or a mouse. And there's a temptation that somebody might have if they're looking at the data to prioritize their security controls to address the areas that have the most density or the greatest likelihood of some type of attack. But the point here is that we can't assume adequate security if you're not covering as many or all of the areas as possible. The weak link could be the thing that sinks the ship. So what now? Well, no surprise, Honeywell's got a solution in this space. Some of you are likely familiar with what we call Secure Media Exchange, or SMX. We haven't really shared many recent updates with the media on the SMX solution. And since we first launched, there's some new features we've added to it and things that we haven't really promoted adequately, and we'd like to share more detail on those with you today. So the newest model of SMX that we're announcing this week is SMX ST. Very lightweight, portable solution, built-in battery backup, cellular connectivity, so someone could take this on the go from site to site and still have protection for checking USB drives or portable devices. We're also adding enterprise management capability, so there's going to be a centralized system that you can use to gain visibility across all of your SMX systems. Makes it easy to manage those and get a sense of what's happening as people are scanning and checking in drives across your sites. Honeywell's is the only solution on the market with patent pending technology that we call Trust. So Trust, which stands for Trusted Response User Substantiation Technology, which is a mouthful, is that technology that we've included that protects against those malicious USB devices. So Trust actually intercepts when you plug the device into the computer. It prompts the user and says, this device is telling me it's a keyboard. Is that what you thought you were actually inserting? And the user hopefully will realize, no, I thought this was a storage device. Don't allow this connection to occur. So we're intercepting the automated process that we all take for granted of inserting a USB device and making sure that the human qualifies the threat before it becomes something that you can't walk back from. Any of our customers, of course, have access to all of the new features that we roll out to our customer base. As soon as they're available, there's no extra charge for those. They're part of what you're paying for. SMX, of course, includes a threat intelligence subscription as part of the service. And it's really the only solution that we're aware of for the industrial market that enforces the use of only authorized USB devices. And by that I mean, if you attempt to bypass the controls, the SMX protected endpoints will say, that USB drive you just tried to insert has not yet been scanned, verified, and checked in. Go back to the gateway, do your scan, check it in, and then come back, and then it can be used. You can't actually bypass the controls that our solution includes. I mentioned earlier as well that we're introducing this new enterprise management tool. So think of this as a centralized dashboard or portal where a company's OT security officer could log in and see all the different SMX systems across their environment. Doesn't matter where they are in the world. You can get a sense of how many files are being scanned, which USB drives have been inserted and checked in, but maybe not checked back out again. And it's an easier way to ingest a large amount of data from the increase that we're seeing in traffic with all these USB drives coming and going. Now, there are, of course, some very essential best practices or tips that we have that customers could deploy. And so we'll cover those briefly today. We actually intend to publish a paper shortly with more detail on these in a webinar that you'll get more information about. So making sure that you've got good, solid technical controls in place that are enforced. If they're just policy-based, they won't be effective. Monitoring and managing your network traffic. You might say, what does that have to do with USB security? Well, usually if a host is compromised, it'll start talking to other hosts on the network or try to reach external sources for command and control. So even though it's not directly a USB control, it's important to be looking at what's happening across your network. In this space, we have a lot of customers that have challenges around how often they update their antivirus signatures. There's good reasons for that in some cases, and in others, it's just because they lack resources to make this happen the way it should. The older your AV signatures, of course, the more risk you're facing. And then making sure wherever it's feasible that you're patching and hardening your end nodes so that they're not vulnerable. It's very tempting to allow people to use personal USB devices. All of us have likely done it ourselves. There have been attacks in the news where malware have entered critical facilities and taken operations offline. So we know that this is a definite threat vector. And then lastly, to handle the risk around ransomware, making sure that all of your endpoints, especially those that are critical for operations, you're taking good regular backups, you're testing those so that if anything did happen to compromise that host, you can roll it back to the last known good state. So we have a few customer success stories that I'd just like to share as we approach the close here. One was a story that we heard last year from a pulp and paper customer on the East Coast. And site operation manager was very excited to tell us that he was happy to discover that his SMX system operated even when he took it outside of the site. It was the built-in battery backup that I mentioned and the cellular connection. So he was going from site to site, showing all the site operators he had this new solution that he was very pleased with. So we were happy to hear about that. And this one might be a little bit hard to read on screen as well, but this is a real screen capture. We have not disclosed publicly because it was somewhat sensitive before. But this was a customer who contacted us believing that SMX had surfaced a false positive flag on a USB drive that was scanned before going into their site. So SMX blocked the threat before it got into the facility. And a lot of you would be familiar with the Triton attacks or Trisis that was in the news last year. I don't need to get into details about that, but what this screenshot illustrates is SMX picked up a new previously unseen variant of the Triton malware. And our customer suspected that there was something wrong with the USB drive because they got it from a trusted vendor. And they didn't see how it could have malware on it that was so dangerous. But thankfully, SMX proved itself in that case, and that threat was blocked. Okay, looking ahead. I'm not suggesting we should all take up smoking, right? But if you're familiar with this very popular consumer trend, these e-cigarettes or vapes, many of you understand, of course, that they're charged with a USB adapter. So we're going to challenge you to stretch your thinking a little bit here. There's a talk we have coming up at RSA that's very much in line, of course, with what we're promoting today. I won't share details, but we want to really get the public and our customers thinking along the lines of different types of attacks that can enter a site that may not just be malware-based or file-based on USB drives. So March the 7th at RSA, Eric Knapp, who is our head of R&D for cyber at Honeywell, will be presenting. A lot of you would have also received a copy of the USB threat report that we published last year. This covered a sample of 50 different locations that we had gathered globally. So there's some different industries we've listed here that were included. The findings of that were surprising even to us, and I just got a couple of key highlights. If anyone's interested, I do have a copy, a printed copy I could share. I've got a handful here. Just come up and let me know afterwards, or contact us, and we'd be happy to send it to you. But out of the sample that we collected, 44% of the locations that were protected by SMX found and blocked at least one suspicious file type. And out of those, 11% would not have been detected by traditional antivirus. And these all pose significant threat to the customer environments. Okay, so for more information, you can go to bcybersecurity.com. I believe we have a few minutes still for Q&A. And if there are any questions, we can cover those now. Yeah, go ahead.
I'm sorry if I wasn't paying attention, but did you say that personal USB devices include cell phones?
I did not say that, but they absolutely can, so thank you for calling that out. Anything you could connect over a USB cable to a peripheral like or a computer should be considered a possible threat vector. Good question. Yeah. Any other questions? Okay, well, thank you very much for your time.